Alright, so I thought I'd make this video to describe how to replace the steering coupling. I already replaced it, but you might have seen it already if you look up Kia Forte or Kia Optima or Hyundai Elantra steering coupling. It's the little rubber bushing that's basically inside between the motor, the power steering motor, not power steering, electric steering motor, and the transmission of the steering. I couldn't find any videos on how to do it specifically on a Kia Forte. The process is pretty similar, but a little different because of a couple things. So here's my Kia. Like I said, I already finished the process of replacing the coupling, but I want to show you the things that were different. I'll link down in the description other videos that basically show you how to get to this point so far. Like I said, it's very similar for the Hyundai Elantra. It's just a matter of ways that this thing is actually mounted differently. So the first thing is going to be that once you get this whole bottom shrouding off and then you get this metal plate off, you're going to be actually able to see the motor back there. And like I said, if in the other videos, you'll see that they'll have torque screws connecting that motor up, and these are T30 screws. And the problem with the Kia Forte is that you can't reach it. Some videos show you another method of getting to one of the top screws by taking out the instrument cluster. I tried that. The actual structure of the car and some of the vents back there where you'd have to tear out basically the whole dash if you wanted to reach that last torque screw back there. So it ends up being that for the Kia Forte, you do have to drop the steering column down. So basically the way you do that is you're going to remove the fuse box. You can already see I disconnected all the wire harnesses. There's 3 more harnesses back there. You're going to have some 10mm bolts you have to remove, and you'll be able to, it's kind of a jigsaw to get this thing out, but you'll be able to get it out once you disconnect those. So you'll need to get that out of the way. Like I said, there's a shield up here that we get rid of, that you get rid of before then. And then the cowl on the steering column, you do have to get rid of that. Anyway, so basically the process that you can't really see in other videos is underneath here. I don't even know if I can see it on my camera, but you'll have to stick your hand back there and you're gonna feel a 14mm bolt. It's kind of a bolt that drives itself all the way through the steering column. It kind of holds this whole assembly through. Holds that whole assembly on. And it's back there. You'll feel it once you get there, really. Let's see if I can get better. There you go, I grabbed a flashlight so I can show you better where that bolt is. Hopefully I can get some light back there. I'll try to get some light back there. Here it is, hiding back here. Show you a better view of where it is. Come and sneak past these 2 bolts. There's that 14mm. Like I said, kind of creates a hinge point that holds this whole assembly on. So you do need to get that piece out, but now you can finally see where it is back there. It's torqued on pretty tight, so you'll have to find a way to get leverage and get that unbolted. But basically that's gonna allow this whole steering assembly to drop down on this side. Before it really does drop down, you do have to undo these 2 bolts right here. Right there. And those are 12mm. So I recommend getting that 14mm bolt out first, and then tightening these, loosening these guys down, and so the steering column will start to drop then. Oh, before you do that, you do have to make sure you disconnect all the wire harnesses that you see. You don't want it to, the steering column is kind of heavy, so you don't want it to come down on you and you lose control of it and have it snap into your wires. That'll make it pretty The reason you're doing this is trying to save money, and that'll make it pretty expensive to lose some wires. So, like I said, you'll end up loosening these bolts up, and it'll slowly drop down. You have to make sure you catch it and lower it down to the ground gently. At that point, that motor will actually be sitting about right here, and you'll be able to access it freely with your torque key. Another thing I forgot to mention is getting the steering column actually back up in there where everything's mounted up is kind of difficult. Tried it a couple different ways. The joints on the steering column kind of do some weird things that work against you. But essentially what you kind of have to do is you have to line it back up. You have to line this housing back up in where that 14mm bolt slides through. Basically get it as close as you can. It doesn't have to be exactly right, but you'll see that there's a bracket that the bolt kind of goes through and that the steering assembly gets held into. You have to line it up in there as best you can. At that point, you can line up these bolts. It might help to have a friend. I didn't, but it might help to have a friend to get these bolts threaded on and snugged up a bit. And then you're gonna have to play around with pushing this thing around and wiggling it, and you'll have to unlock this guy to kind of give you a better, you get a little bit more flexibility to wiggle this thing back into its bracket and drive that 14mm bolt through. And I have to show you guys the final result. No longer makes any kind of sound when I turn it. And that's pretty much the process. Like I said, I'll link other videos before. I'm sorry that this process isn't fully explained. I only thought to make a video right after I finished it. But hopefully this will give you guys some hints where you've seen other videos, but you got a Kia Forte and it's just not quite the same process.